Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, we are going to talk about virtualization as an appliance. Taking a physical hardware appliance and making it a virtual appliance. And then as an OEM, being able to just sell a virtual appliance to a customer. Stay tuned. So going way back to 2013, I actually wrote a blog that was titled The Tale of the Mysterious Virtual Appliance. And this is a subject matter that I've dealt with for probably 15 to 18 years, which is a customer would come to me and say, wouldn't it be cool if I could take my physical OEM appliance and make it into a virtual machine, just put all the software on top of the Microsoft OS, seal it all up into a virtual machine, and then just sell my customer a VM that they could just download and put on their existing hardware. So the problem with that in the IoT channel is that from the very beginning, the channel requires hardware. So you always had to buy the Microsoft co-sticker license, apply it to a piece of hardware, load the operating system, put a software application on top of that to make it into some type of functional appliance, and then sell it as a turnkey hardware plus software solution. And the CLA, or customer license agreement, that you sign, it actually requires that to happen. So what happened is customers have come along and said, hey, I'm running into scenarios where I go to sell them especially in the server space, I go and I want to sell them my server appliance. And so when I walk in to this giant server room and say, hey, I want to sell you another server appliance, just add it to the other 100 servers you already have, the customers typically look at them and say, no, I already have all the hardware I want. I don't want any more hardware. Can I just buy your solution as a software solution? Maybe software as a service, or just a virtual machine that I can just add to my already existing infrastructure? And with that, I went to Microsoft and I said, hey, can we do this without the hardware? And the problem with that for many years is that the Microsoft operating system is licensed to the hardware. So to sell an operating system to someone without knowing what the hardware is, they just couldn't get past that hurdle. So over the years, we kind of worked with them and said, hey, well, what if the OEM verifies with their customer what the hardware is, how many processors, how many processor cores, where they're going to install the VM, and they pass along the license terms that say, hey, you have to make sure this is licensed properly. You buy this from me, make sure it's the right amount of processor cores, and I will sell you the software solution that you will put on your existing hardware. And they finally approved it. So I updated this blog with a new blog, and I suggest you go out and check it out, because it will explain this process, and then come back to us if you want to do a virtual appliance. We have many options. I'm going to go through a few now to explain some of this, because when it comes to virtualization, the licensing is very different when it comes to server or client. So the Windows client, Windows 10, Windows 11, is licensed when it comes to virtualization very differently than when we start talking about Windows Server. So I always have to stop and divide those into two buckets, because virtualization is licensed differently. So let's start with Let's start with the server product. So I'll throw these part numbers up here for you. Let me get the blog back out of the way. So in the server space for the embedded IoT channel, the server products, they allow virtualization. So when you buy them, you put them on the piece of hardware, and then you're allowed to run server VMs. That's all included in the license terms. But of course, what is required is that it has to go onto hardware. So Microsoft came up with an amendment to the CLA agreement that basically removes the hardware requirement. So now if you want to offer your product on a server as a server VM and just sell as a software only solution, you now have that option, but you do have to sign an amendment. That's why it says requires amendment. And we have two options. The older server products are not available in this amendment option. It's 2019 and 2022. And you will buy this specific part number, and it's called the VMAAA, which stands for Virtual Machine as an Appliance. And you will buy these parts. You will work with us here at Arrow. Get with us. We will work you through and hold your hand through the amendment process that you signed. Once you have that amendment signed, then you can procure these parts, which you can then sell directly to your customer without hardware. Perfect. Now let's talk about client. So let's get the client parts up here. And so when it comes to the client let's start with the first base fact that's very important to understand when it comes to the Windows IoT client family of products. In the license terms for the client products, it actually states you are prohibited from using it in a virtual environment. Basically, Microsoft said for all of the Windows Client IoT family of products, you have to put it on hardware. So Microsoft, again, if you were going to then take a Windows 10 LTSC 2019 or 2021 product, load it, create a virtual machine, and sell the virtual machine, you will need to do the bottom one here. So the bottom one, it requires the amendment, which will remove the hardware requirement. So if you're basically going to go with no hardware at all, like what we've been talking about, you will use the bottom parts, and it does require an amendment, just like the server family. And then we'll get into the QoS versus non-QoS in just a second. Let me address the top parts, because you can see the top options say no amendment. And this is basically where you're basically virtualizing it, but you're putting it on hardware. So if you're still going to ship your solution with hardware, then you don't have to worry about amendment, but you do have to buy these specific parts to virtualize it. So these specific parts have license terms that allow virtualization. And if you buy these parts, then you can virtualize the client OS and put it on a piece of hardware and sell it. And then again, the bottom ones are if you're going to virtualize it and sell it without hardware, you've got to go through the amendment process, and then you will use these parts. Now, qualified versus non-qualified. There's obviously, I'm not showing pricing, get with us for pricing. The qualified OS option is less expensive than the non-qualified. And it has to do with your hypervisor that you're going to put the VM on. So typically, if you're going to put these on top of a non-Microsoft operating system, like VMware as an example, you would have to buy the non-qualified one, which the license is more expensive. If you're going to put it on top of a Windows Server hypervisor, and we'll list the other operating systems that qualify too, then you can use the lower expensive option. So let me show you guys I'm going to get rid of those parts, and I'm going to pull up the actual license terms. Here we go. And let me see if I can crank this zoom in so we can see a little bit better. Go up to 170. Here we go. All right. So looking at these, what you have is you're going to have specific, license terms for the Windows 10 family. And if you see here's where we talk about the non-qualified operating system. So all of these things listed here, in addition to non-Microsoft, which would be your VMware. So they're not calling out all the non-Microsoft ones like VMware, but if it's not a Microsoft one, it's non-qualified. And then there are certain Microsoft ones that also are not qualified, and that's what these are. So the older Windows 7 family, the Windows Embedded 8 family, the older Windows Server 2008 family, and then the free server Hyper-V, strangely enough, is not included. So what is included, if we scroll down to the qualified OS, is your Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC, LTSB, or SAC for IoT, or successor products. So, and then a little bit more there, or the Windows Server 2016, or standard data center or successor, which means anything newer. So any of the Windows Server 2016 and newer will be underneath the qualified, and then Windows 10 IoT Enterprise LTSC or SAC, those all qualify as the hypervisor. So you can buy a license for the Windows 10 LTSC as an example, put that on the piece of hardware, and then you can then buy this virtual license for the VM to go on top of the hypervisor there. Perfect. Virtualization is a very complex subject matter, and one where you certainly want somebody with years of experience to talk you through this. Again, I've been supporting virtualization for many years. Check out the link to my blog in the bottom or in the video description, and make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Stay up to date on all the videos here on the Windows Champ channel. Thank you guys for watching.